Hi.
I was on top of the world, just wrapped up a huge deal that could set my family for life. After days of traveling and finalizing the sale of the pharmaceutical company, I was eager to come home to Camila and the kids. But when I pulled into the driveway, I saw a gold Mercedes parked there, something I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped. I walked into the house, hoping it was nothing, but the silence hit me like a freight train. No kids, no noise, just eerily quiet. I heard soft murmurs from our bedroom, and I convinced myself it was nothing. But when I opened the door, there they were, Camila, asleep in bed with another man. I froze. The guy woke up, looking terrified. Camila stirred, blinking up at me with a confused expression, like I was the one out of place. "Max, I thought you weren't coming back until tomorrow," she said. All calm like this was no big deal. "Who the hell is this?" I demanded, barely able to get the words out. She shrugged. "It's not what you think." I wanted to scream. "Really? Because it sure looks like you're in bed with another man." She tried to play it off. "It's complicated. You've been gone so much we needed comfort." I felt the world collapse around me. There was no apology, no guilt, just her trying to explain away the betrayal like it was nothing. "How long?" I asked quietly, though I didn't want to hear the answer. She hesitated, then shrugged again. "A while. We've had issues. It wasn't just a mistake. It was calculated." And just like that, everything I thought I had was gone. I stood there, heart racing, barely processing the words she was saying. I wanted to explode, to shout, to break something, but I didn't. Instead, I just stared at her, the woman I trusted, the woman I'd built my life with, lying in bed with another man. She kept trying to play it off, telling me it wasn't what I thought. But the more she spoke, the less sense it made. "It just happened, Max. We were drifting apart, and he was there for me when you weren't." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're seriously telling me this guy was there for you while I was working my ass off to give you everything you wanted?" She looked at me, calm as ever. "You were never here, Max. You were always gone. I needed someone, and he was there." Her words cut deeper than anything physical. My mind was reeling, trying to make sense of it. "And you couldn't talk to me? You couldn't tell me we were falling apart before you hopped into bed with him?" She looked down, shifting uncomfortably. "I didn't want to hurt you." "Hurting me?" I scoffed, my voice rising. "You've already hurt me, Camila. You don't get to pretend this was some innocent mistake." The guy in bed shifted, trying to sneak out of the situation, but I could barely focus on him. I didn't care about him. He was just the symptom of a much bigger problem. Camila sat up in bed, pulling the covers around her like some kind of shield. "Max, I know you're angry, but we can talk about this. We can fix it." "Fix it? How do you fix something that's broken beyond repair?" I wanted to scream at her to leave, to get out, but I didn't. I just stood there, fighting back the tears that were threatening to spill. This wasn't how I imagined coming home. "We're done," I said, my voice shaking with emotion, though I tried to stay calm. She looked at me with wide eyes. "What do you mean, done?" "Done. Finished. I can't do this anymore." It felt like a weight lifted off me, even though I was about to lose everything. The house, the life we built, our family. It was all slipping away, and all I could do was stand there, numb, watching her try to make it seem like it wasn't a big deal. But it was. It was everything, but I couldn't look at her anymore. I turned my back and started pacing the room, trying to make sense of everything. The words she had said earlier echoed in my head. "We've had issues." Issues. That was an understatement. Our life wasn't some relationship with issues. It was a betrayal, a total destruction of everything I thought we were. I stopped pacing and turned back to her. She was sitting up in bed now, clutching the blanket around her like it could protect her from the storm I was ready to unleash. The guy who had been lying next to her was now sitting up too, looking like a deer caught in headlights. "Why him?" I finally spat out. "Why this guy? Someone I don't even know." She hesitated, looking at me like she was trying to come up with a story that would make it all make sense. "Max, it wasn't like that. He's just a friend. It just happened." "A friend?" I was done hearing her excuses. She could spin her words however she wanted, but the reality was right in front of me. There was no just happened. There was intent, and there was dishonesty. She had made a choice, over and over again, and this guy was just the consequence. I don't care how it happened, Camila. You betrayed me. You betrayed our family. My voice was rising again, the anger welling up inside me, but it felt like it was boiling over in all the wrong ways. She looked at me with pleading eyes. I didn't want to hurt you, Max. It's just everything's been so hard. You're always gone, and I just... always gone. I cut her off, incredulous. You think I like being gone? You think I wanted to work day and night, so I could come home to find you with some guy in my bed? You don't get to blame me for your choices, Camila. Her face twisted, and she let out a frustrated sigh. You don't get it, do you? I needed comfort. I wasn't getting it from you. The words felt like a slap, even more painful than before. Comfort, I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. You needed comfort? So, you go and sleep with someone else. She looked down, like she couldn't even meet my eyes anymore. Max, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I never meant for it to go this far. But it had gone too far. Farther than I could ever come back from. I could feel the tears threatening, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not yet, not in front of her. I couldn't let her see how much she had broken me. I want you to leave, I said, the words tasting bitter as I said them. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't be here, in this house, pretending everything was fine when my whole world was falling apart. I'm sorry, Max, she whispered, but it was too little, too late. She had already destroyed everything. Camila stood there for a second, looking at me like she expected me to change my mind. But I didn't. I couldn't. Every ounce of love I had for her felt like it had been ripped out and replaced with disgust. She opened her mouth to say something else, but I cut her off. No, I want you to leave, Camila. Right now. The silence between us was deafening. She glanced at the guy who had been in my bed, and for the first time, I saw her face crack. There was no apology, no understanding. Just nothing. She grabbed her phone and started texting someone, probably him. And then she turned back to me, almost pleading. Please, Max, don't do this. Let's just talk, okay? You don't know everything. I could feel the rage bubbling inside me. You've been lying to me for God knows how long, and now you want to talk. You had every chance to be honest with me, but you chose him. You chose to betray me, and you still think I'll just forgive you? You think we can go back to the way things were? She opened her mouth again, but this time, I wasn't interested in hearing it. Get out, I repeated, my voice cold final. The guy got up, looking awkward and out of place, like he'd been waiting for this moment, but he didn't say anything. He just grabbed his clothes and headed for the door, without another word. Camila didn't even seem to care. She just stood there, eyes darting between me and the door, still unsure of what to do. I didn't wait for her to make the first move. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. You've done enough damage. Now leave. Finally, she grabbed her bag, muttering something about how she was sorry, but it didn't matter anymore. I could barely make out the words. She walked out, and I slammed the door behind her, the finality of it ringing in my ears. I leaned against the door, staring at the walls like they might have some answer for me. But there was nothing. My whole life had just been turned upside down in a matter of hours. The house felt emptier than it ever had. I didn't know what was worse, the betrayal or the fact that I'd lost the woman I had loved so much, the woman I thought I'd spent my life with. I could hear the kids stirring upstairs, but I couldn't bring myself to face them yet. I didn't know how to explain this, how to tell them that everything had changed in a single night. I collapsed onto the couch, my hands shaking, trying to wrap my head around everything. My mind kept going back to that image, Camila in bed with him. I couldn't shake it, no matter how hard I tried. I had no idea what I was going to do next. All I knew was that everything I thought I knew about my life was gone. I was alone now, and somehow, that felt worse than anything that I couldn't sleep that night. My mind wouldn't stop, replaying everything. Camila in bed with him, her excuses, her lies. I kept going over every moment, getting angrier and more defeated with each thought. Eventually, exhaustion kicked in, but even then, my sleep was restless, full of nightmares. When I woke up, I felt like I hadn't slept at all. The house was quiet. The kids were still asleep, and for a split second, I wished everything was normal again. But it wasn't. Camila was gone, and I was left to figure out what to do next. I forced myself out of bed and checked my phone. No surprise, Camila had already texted. I quickly shoved that thought aside. I wasn't ready for more of her lies. I couldn't deal with it. I grabbed my keys and got in the car. The silence at home was suffocating, and I needed space to think. I drove aimlessly until I ended up at a coffee shop, trying to clear my head. I didn't know what to do, but I couldn't stay at home. The thought of facing the kids without having answers was unbearable. I sat by the window, sipping my coffee, when my phone buzzed. It was Camila. "Max, we need to talk." "I'm sorry. Can we please work this out?" I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to reply, to let out all my frustration, but I couldn't fall back into her trap. I put my phone down, took a deep breath, and reminded myself that I had to figure out what came next. I couldn't keep letting her control the narrative that I didn't respond to Camila's message. I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready for her words, the same tired excuses. What could she possibly say to make me forget what she'd done? What she hadn't done for months? I spent the next couple of hours lost in my own thoughts, trying to think about the right next step. But all I could focus on was the way her betrayal had cut through everything I thought I knew about our life. The future I'd worked so hard for, all the plans, everything seemed like it had been built on sand. Eventually, I dragged myself back to the house. The kids would be waking up soon, and I had no idea how to face them. I couldn't exactly explain what had happened without shattering their world too. As soon as I walked in, I saw their little shoes by the door, their backpacks, everything looking so normal. It made the whole situation worse. It was like everything around me was still pretending things were okay, while I was living in this new, brutal reality. I took a deep breath and went upstairs to their rooms. As soon as they saw me, their faces lit up, and for a second, I thought I could fake it. I could pretend everything was fine, but I couldn't lie to them. Not after what had happened. Not after Camila's betrayal. I sat down with them, forcing myself to focus. I needed to keep it together for them. They deserved that. But inside, I felt completely hollow. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Camila. "I can't keep doing this, Max. I miss you. We can fix this. Please talk to me." I stared at the message, feeling torn. Part of me wanted to fall for it, to go back to what we had, to give her another chance. But the other part of me was screaming to protect myself, to never let her back in. I didn't respond. Instead, I just set the phone down, took a breath, and turned back to my kids. There were bigger things to figure out. I had to take care of them first, and somehow, I had to find a way to move on from this, without losing myself in the process. The days after Camila left were a blur. I moved through the motions, feeding the kids, getting them ready for school, making sure they didn't see the cracks in the facade I was trying so hard to hold together. But inside, I was falling apart. Every time I looked at them, I saw how badly I was failing them. They deserved better than this. Every time my phone buzzed, I almost jumped out of my skin. It was always Camila, pushing for a conversation, asking for another chance. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't go back to a life of lies. I kept telling myself that, but part of me still wanted to believe we could fix it, fix us. I kept my distance, though. I knew I had to. There was no future in trying to go back to a marriage that had been built on broken trust. But that didn't make the pain go away. One evening, I finally gave in and answered one of her texts. "I'm done, Camila. I can't do this anymore." Her reply came in almost instantly. "Please don't say that. We can work through it. I miss you." I read her words, and a part of me wanted to believe it, wanted to hear her say everything was going to be okay. But another part of me felt the anger rise again, the betrayal. I thought about the guy in our bed, the lies, the way she had dismissed everything I had worked for. I couldn't respond. I couldn't give her any more of myself. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me, about finding my own peace. I wasn't ready to forgive her, and I wasn't sure if I ever would be. I couldn't keep living in the past. So, I set my phone down, looked around at my life, and realized that no matter how much it hurt, I had to let go. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, the numbness started to wear off. I couldn't avoid the reality of it any longer. The house felt emptier than ever. Camila was gone, and everything that had once felt normal now felt foreign, like I was walking around in someone else's life. I kept thinking about what she'd done, and each time, it hit me harder. I couldn't help but replay her words. "It wasn't what you think, Max. I never meant to hurt you." But I wasn't stupid. I knew what I saw. I knew what happened, and I couldn't keep pretending I didn't. The kids were handling it better than I expected, but I could tell they knew something was off. They didn't say it, but their little faces told me everything. I had to be strong for them, even when I felt like I was falling apart inside. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I decided to confront the mess head on. I sat down with the phone in my hand, staring at Camila's name on the screen. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Part of me wanted to hear her apologize, to hear her beg for me to take her back. But I knew that was just me clinging to a false hope. It wasn't about fixing things anymore. It was about me finally accepting the truth. "Camila, I can't keep doing this. I need to move on." I hit send, feeling a wave of relief as the words left my fingers. It was done. I had made my decision. I don't know why, but I waited for her response. Part of me braced for the flood of apologies, but nothing came. No, "I'm sorry." No begging. Nothing. The silence was the final nail in the coffin. It wasn't just the end of our relationship. It was the end of me holding on to something that was never going to be what I thought it was. That was the hardest part, realizing that the life I had worked so hard to build had been based on lies, on someone else's choices. But even in the pain, I knew I had to let go. If I didn't, I'd keep dragging myself through this, stuck in the past. I had to find a way forward. So, I put the phone down, took a deep breath, and focused on the only thing that mattered now, moving forward. For me, for my kids, for my future. The silence after sending that message was deafening. I spent the next few days in a haze, feeling like I was just going through the motions. Work, meals, bedtime. It all felt like something I had to do, not something I wanted to do. The house felt even emptier without Camila, and I kept expecting her to walk through the door, acting like nothing had happened. But she didn't. I couldn't get used to the absence. It was strange, like a piece of me was missing. But every time I thought about reaching out, about asking her to come back, I stopped myself. I didn't want to go back to that life of pretending everything was okay, of ignoring the fact that she'd betrayed me in the worst way possible. The kids didn't ask much, and for that, I was grateful. They were old enough to notice the change, but not old enough to understand why everything felt off. I did my best to keep them grounded, to make sure they didn't feel the weight of everything crashing down around us. But I knew they could feel it, even if they couldn't name it. I was getting used to the quiet. At first, it felt suffocating, but over time, it became something else. A chance to breathe, to reflect, to figure out who I was without her. I wasn't sure who that was yet, but I knew I had to find out. A week later, I finally got the call. "Max, it's me." Camila's voice on the other end of the line was softer than usual, and it took me a second to recognize it. She wasn't angry. She wasn't pleading. She just sounded tired. "I know I've screwed up. I know I've hurt you," she continued. "But I've been thinking a lot, and I want to try to make things right." For a moment, I just stared at the wall, my heart racing. I had imagined this conversation 100 times in my head. I had rehearsed what I would say, how I would tell her I was done. But now that the moment was here, I didn't know what to say. "Camila," I said finally, my voice steady. "It's too late. You had your chances, and you threw them away. I don't know what happened to us, but I'm not going to keep chasing something that's already over." There was silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her swallowing back tears. But I wasn't going to change my mind. "I'm sorry, Max," she whispered. "I wish I could take it all back." But she couldn't. None of us could. "Goodbye, Camila," I said and hung up the phone. It was over, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of peace. After that conversation, things started to shift. It wasn't instant, and it wasn't easy, but slowly, I felt like I was starting to find my footing again. I hadn't realized just how much of my life had been tied to Camila until she was gone. It wasn't just the relationship, it was everything. The routines, the expectations, the future I had imagined. Losing her felt like losing an entire world. But each day that passed, I realized I was building a new one. A quieter one. A more uncertain one. But it was mine. I threw myself into work. The deal with the pharmaceutical company was still in the final stages, and I needed to keep my focus there if I was going to give the kids any kind of stability. I started pushing through the days with a new sense of determination, like I was clawing my way back to something I had almost lost. The kids were adjusting, too. We were starting to find our rhythm in this new life. They were still too young to understand the details, but they knew something had changed. They asked questions, simple things at first. Is Mom coming home soon? Why are you so tired, Dad? I answered them as best as I could, keeping it vague, telling them that sometimes grown-ups don't always work things out the way we want them to. I didn't want to lie to them, but I didn't want to drag them into my pain either. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, trying to be their rock while my own world felt like it was falling apart. But somehow I managed. Slowly, I began to realize that I was stronger than I had given myself credit for. One evening, as I sat with them watching a movie, something clicked. They were laughing, enjoying the moment, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what had happened. I was just present. I wasn't worrying about Camila or the pain she had caused. I wasn't obsessing over the past. I was in the moment with them, and for the first time, it felt like everything might be okay. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know where my life would go from here or if I would ever be able to trust anyone again. But in that moment, I knew I was moving forward, one step at a time. And that was enough that a couple of weeks passed, and life, though still full of uncertainty, was starting to feel a little more manageable. I was adjusting to this new routine, one where the silence in the house was more of a companion than an enemy. I kept busy with work, focusing on the kids, and making sure I didn't fall into the trap of constantly thinking about the past. Every now and then, though, there were reminders, things I'd see or hear that would bring everything rushing back, like when I came across one of Camila's old sweaters hanging in the closet, or when I saw her favorite coffee mug in the kitchen. But for the most part, I was learning how to live with the absence. It wasn't easy, but it was something I had to do for my own sake. Then, one evening, as I was getting the kids ready for bed, I heard a knock at the door. It was late, too late for any kind of casual visitor. My heart sank, already knowing who it was before I even opened the door. Sure enough, standing on my doorstep was Camila, looking worn out and small in the soft glow of the porch light. I froze for a moment, not sure what to do. I wasn't prepared for this. I hadn't seen her in weeks, hadn't heard from her since that last phone call. But here she was, standing in front of me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. "Max," she said quietly, almost as if she were testing the waters. "Can we talk?" I didn't invite her in. I couldn't. Not like this. "What do you want, Camila?" Her eyes flickered with guilt, but there was something else there too, uncertainty, like she wasn't sure how to fix what she'd broken. "I've been thinking a lot. About everything. I know I can't undo the past, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I made a huge mistake. I hurt you, and I hate myself for it." I stared at her for a long time, trying to read her face, trying to decide if this was some kind of desperate plea, or if she was genuinely remorseful. I had spent so much time thinking about what I would say to her if she ever came back, but now that she was standing in front of me, all I felt was tired. "I've heard this before," I said, my voice flat. "You've apologized 100 times, but it doesn't change anything." She lowered her head, and for a moment, I thought she might just leave. But instead, she took a shaky breath and spoke again. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, Max. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But I wanted to see you, to tell you face to face that I'm sorry." I didn't say anything at first. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to slam the door and walk away, but another part of me, some foolish part, still wanted to believe she could make this right. But I knew better than that. I knew that letting her back and would only open the door to more hurt, more lies. "You should go, Camila," I said finally, my voice firm. I can't do this with you anymore. She stood there for a moment, as if she were weighing my words, then nodded quietly. I understand. I'm sorry. Without another word, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. I stood there for a few seconds, the cold air brushing against my skin, and then closed the door softly behind me. I didn't feel the relief I thought I would. Instead, there was just emptiness. Camila was gone again, and this time, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit before. I wasn't just letting go of her. I was letting go of everything I had thought our life would be. The future I imagined, the family we were supposed to have. It was all gone. But as I walked back to the kids' room and tucked them into bed, I realized that I was going to be okay. Maybe not right away. Maybe not in the ways I expected. But in time, I would heal. I would move on. One step at a time. It wasn't as if I woke up the next day with all the answers, or some magical sense of peace. It wasn't that easy. The days after Camila's visit felt a little heavier. I couldn't shake the image of her standing on the porch, that sad, almost pleading look in her eyes. I wanted to believe she was genuinely sorry, that maybe, just maybe, she had learned something. But the truth was, I couldn't go back to the way things were. Too much had broken between us, and some things just couldn't be fixed. I threw myself into my routine again. Work, the kids, cleaning up the house, one corner at a time. It wasn't much, but it was something I could control, something I could feel good about. It helped to focus on the small wins, getting through another day, keeping the kids laughing, cooking dinner without feeling like I was falling apart inside. The kids were adjusting, and I was adjusting. It was a different kind of adjustment, though. The kind that felt like learning to walk again after a fall. Each step was shaky, uncertain, but I was getting there. It was hard to shake the loneliness, especially in the quiet moments when I found myself alone with my thoughts. But as the days went on, I started to recognize that the emptiness wasn't as crushing as it used to be. It was still there, sure, but it didn't feel like it was swallowing me whole anymore. Instead, it was a space that needed to be filled with something else, something better. I started doing little things for myself, things I had forgotten how to do when I was so wrapped up in being a husband. I'd go for walks in the mornings before the kids were up, or stay up late reading a book without worrying about work the next day. It wasn't much, but it was mine. One evening, about a month after Camila's visit, I sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a notebook. I'd been putting off writing down my thoughts for weeks, but tonight, it felt like the right time. I needed to start letting go of the past. I needed to stop reliving the betrayal, stop letting it control me. I started writing about everything, about the pain, the anger, the confusion. But I also wrote about the things I'd learned, about what I was capable of, about the strength I hadn't realized I had. Writing it down didn't make it go away, but it gave me a way to process it, a way to start healing. By the time I finished, the house was quiet, and I felt lighter. Not completely healed, not by a long shot, but the weight of it all didn't feel so suffocating anymore. The next day, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. The path forward still wasn't clear, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. Whatever came next, I would face it, and I would do it on my own terms. I didn't know what the future held, whether I would ever fully forgive Camila, or if I would ever trust anyone the way I had trusted her. But one thing was certain. I was done looking back. The healing had begun. The weeks that followed were still filled with ups and downs, but something had shifted in me. I didn't feel like I was just surviving anymore. I was living again. Slowly, but surely, the darkness was starting to lift. The kids and I were figuring out our rhythm. We were a little more carefree in our days, laughing more, enjoying the small moments. I'd catch myself smiling at them, seeing them in a new light, realizing how much strength they had given me through all of this. There were still days where the loneliness hit hard, especially when the house was quiet, and my mind wandered to places I didn't want it to go. But those moments were fewer now. I had found new ways to fill the silence. I reconnected with old friends, started picking up hobbies I had let slide years ago, things that made me feel like me again, instead of just someone defined by his past pain. One afternoon, about 2 months after Camila left, I took the kids to the park. It was one of those crisp fall days, the kind that made the air feel fresh and new. As we sat on a bench, watching them run around and play, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. Life was still hard, but it was also beautiful in ways I hadn't noticed before. As I looked at my kids, I realized how much I had been taking for granted. They were the constant in my life, the reason I got up every day and pushed forward. They deserved a dad who wasn't bogged down by the past, who could show them that even when things fall apart, you keep going. That night, after putting them to bed, I found myself sitting in the living room, just thinking. The weight of everything that had happened still lingered, but I wasn't consumed by it anymore. I didn't need Camila's apology or her approval to move on. I was already moving forward, step by step. It was then that I realized something important. I wasn't just healing from Camila's betrayal. I was healing for myself, for my future, for the life I wanted to build for my kids and me. And that was the most empowering thing I'd realized in a long time. A few days later, I got a call from work. The deal with the pharmaceutical company was finally wrapped up, and I was being offered a new role, one that would require a big move. It was a huge opportunity, one that would give us a fresh start, new surroundings, new people, new challenges. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of excitement, a new chapter. It wasn't just about escaping the past. It was about embracing the possibility of something better. For the first time, I felt ready to take the next step. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I was done letting the past dictate my life. I was moving forward, not just for my kids, but for myself. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. And this time, I wasn't looking back. The decision to move wasn't easy. It felt like a massive leap into the unknown. I had lived in this city for years, years full of memories, both good and bad. The idea of leaving behind everything I had known, especially with the kids in tow, felt daunting. But with that new job offer, I couldn't deny that it was the kind of fresh start we needed. I wanted them to have a new space, new opportunities, a place where they could thrive, without the weight of everything that had happened hanging over them. The process of packing up the house was strange. It felt like a final act of closure. Each box I filled, each item I packed, was a small goodbye to the past. I came across so many things that made me pause. The old family photos, the little trinkets Camila had left behind. Each thing was a reminder of a life I once thought would last forever. But as I boxed them up, I didn't feel sadness anymore. Instead, there was a quiet acceptance. I had spent so much time focusing on what I had lost, but now, I was starting to see all that I still had. I had my kids, my health, a future to look forward to. And as I looked around the house one last time, I realized I was finally ready to let go. The move itself was a whirlwind. There was so much to do, so much to organize, and yet, amid all the chaos, I felt a sense of peace. We were heading toward something new, something better. The drive to the new city was quiet. The kids slept most of the way, exhausted from the excitement of the move. I didn't mind the silence. It was comforting, in its own way. As we arrived and pulled up to our new home, I felt a mix of emotions, nervousness, excitement, and even a bit of fear. But I was ready to face them. This was the start of a new chapter. The first few days in our new place were filled with unpacking, settling in, and finding our rhythm. There were moments where I caught myself feeling overwhelmed, like this was all happening too fast. But then I'd look at my kids and remember why I was doing this. They deserved this fresh start. They deserved a dad who wasn't dragging them through the wreckage of the past. As time passed, the weight of the old life faded. Slowly but surely, the new city started to feel like home. The kids made new friends, and I settled into my job, embracing the challenge of building something from scratch. I spent weekends exploring the city, making new memories. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. I never heard from Camila after that final conversation. There were days when I wondered what she was doing, how she was handling everything, but those thoughts became less frequent. I didn't need answers anymore. I didn't need her in my life to feel whole. I had found a way to move on, and I was starting to realize that the life I was building now was better than the one I had before. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly living. And as I watched my kids run around the yard one sunny afternoon, I knew that no matter what had happened before, we were going to be okay. We were finally free to start over, and that freedom was everything. Months had passed since the move, and life, for the most part, was finally starting to feel like a new normal. The kids were thriving in their new school, making friends, and adjusting to the change with surprising ease. They were resilient, and seeing them adapt so quickly made me realize just how strong they were. I couldn't help but feel proud of them. I, on the other hand, had my own ups and downs. There were days when I still missed the idea of what my life could have been. There were moments when the silence in the house felt a little too loud, when I caught myself missing the familiar routine I'd once had with Camila. But then I'd look around and realize that I had everything I needed right in front of me. The love from my kids, the new opportunities in my career, and the strength I had found within myself. I wasn't sure I was ready to date again, or if I even wanted to. But there was this new sense of possibility in the air. I had learned a lot about myself over the last few months, and one thing I knew for sure was that I wasn't going to settle for anything less than someone who valued trust, honesty, and real commitment. That wasn't something I could ever compromise on again. One Saturday afternoon, I took the kids to the park. It was one of those perfect, breezy days where the sun felt just right, and everything seemed peaceful. We sat on a bench by the playground, watching them run around, laughing and playing as usual. As I watched them, I thought back to when things felt broken, when I wasn't sure how I'd move forward. It felt like a lifetime ago. And then, as I sat there, a thought struck me. A thought that hadn't crossed my mind in a long time. I was okay. No, more than okay. I was better than I had been in years. I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. And in that moment, I realized I was grateful for everything that had happened, even the pain. Without it, I wouldn't have learned how strong I was. I wouldn't have rediscovered who I truly was, without relying on anyone else to define me. I didn't know what the future held, but I didn't need to. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control. I was building a life for myself and my kids, one step at a time, and that was enough. Whatever came next, I would face it head on, without hesitation, and without the weight of my past holding me back. The future was uncertain, but it was also wide open, and for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to it.
Goodbye.